The following is a documentary presented in the form of radio play. Your eyes will sometimes get requested back to the screen, but the information will usually be conveyed via sound, like this, or this. There will be 2 intermissions throughout, at which points you are encouraged to pause and have to think before coming back. This is... "99 Red Factories, the last one, this beauty of a beached behemoth of steel and concrete upon which rests 2 pristine pastel provisional houses, located in an industrial heart of Saint-Henri that's now full of modern condos in the place of soot and smog, next to a canal that has long stopped accommodating the cargo boats it was built for. And a tiny pink house. A visual non sequitur begging to be studied and understood. And guess who has... Jesus, that long? Better get started. I have a timeline. It'll help us find our bearings. Its first point is pinned by one of the features of Google Maps not enough people know about. Its ability to travel through time. Thousands of images across 17 years of history, laid out across dozens of virtually identical maps. And one of those maps, in an abandoned corner of time, is the last reproduction of the malting before it got painted. August 2019, 5022 Saint-Ambroise Street, Saint-Henri, Montreal. On October 3rd of the same year was published a surge of articles commenting on the shocking new development to a long-forgotten building. Canada Malting got a set of painted nipples. Though August 2019 is far from the first time people have tried various stunts around the malting. Some were more successful than others. On the last day of July 2017, in the middle of a forgettable summer, a group of teenagers set about climbing it. One of them managed to climb all the way down after the 8th floor gave way to a 6-meter drop. The fall was inevitable given the frequency of the climbs and the state of the building, which has only deteriorated since, as all buildings have a tendency to do once we stop caring for them. The Canada Malting was designed by American architect David Jerome Spence and completed in 1904 with the purpose of malting, which is the process of turning grain to malt, while the parts dating from 1950, the concrete silos, came from Otto Lembert, a man with a fight to pick against names. When the factory officially opened its doors, it was distributing around 250,000 pounds, or 110,000 kilograms per year, to distilleries and breweries. From 1904 to 1970, the company was huge in operations. That is, until the Canal La Chine closed, forcing the company to transport malt by train. That canal is somewhat important. For one, it was the lifeblood of the industry around. Built in 1825 to transport goods and bypass the La Chine Rapids, its closure and eventual repurposing for private recreation, leading to this hilarious pirate-themed protest of people peacefully perusing the seas for promise of freeing the waters for everybody. It is, as it belongs, to the community. Built on immigrant labor for industrialists, and stands today both as a remnant of that past and the future possibilities that lie within the community's grasp. To understand the malting is to understand the Canal La Chine, and to understand the canal is to understand Saint-Henri and the industrial communities around the world, and to understand those is, finally, to understand how people go about interacting with each other, both in loving and, unfortunately, violent ways. That was the 4-2, which is why, in 1980, the writing was officially on the wall. They closed and moved to a place closer to the Victoria Bridge. It was then sold for $500,000 as a soy and corn storage facility to Quanta Holdings Limited. In 1989, the building was officially abandoned and covered in graffiti on the outside as well as the inside. Today, it belongs to Stephen Kwon and remains unused, with reports describing an odor of rotting beans. So, let's say we use those beans and start making some malt with them, eh? Some people complain about safety, and I can see where they're coming from. The industrial period of Saint-Henri is not the most accommodating to raising children. I mean, It feels stupid that I have to say it, but frail limbs and heavy machinery mix all too well. Industrialized societies are typically characterized by the poor living condition of those that permit the industries to go on, and that sadly carries to children of those families. Okay, so a miner walks into a bar. Bartender says, "Sorry, can't serve you." The miner says, "Well, what's wrong?" "Oh, old man Steve. Sorry, I couldn't recognize you under the soot and with that arch in your back. Mistook you for a child, I did." I hate to say it, but industrialization is a machine that brings communities on a conveyor belt and crushes them into workers is a pretty cold take by now. It's not one that's really wrong either. Look at Victorian pictures and it's hard to see the beauty through the thick layer of smog and hiding behind factories. It's a past we're only starting to recover from as we take away the institutions that were used to oppress us to replace them with, well, I'm sure it's something good. Does anyone know the history of the malting? I mean, history is important, isn't it? If you remember the introductory hook, you'll understand the site is pretty popular with daredevils and drunken dudes. If you do, I think it shouldn't come as a surprise that the first idea for renovations is some form of skate park or rock climbing wall. People have proposed it, and it would have a couple of advantages. For one, compared to every other idea, it's probably the easiest to do. Destroy everything, decontaminate the ground, which is a pretty big task in and of itself, and plop on some concrete structures. Then, it would fit pretty well the image Saint-Henri has been trying to give itself of a deindustrialized, modern neighborhood that accommodates families and tourists from elsewhere in the city. It would be safer and would still fulfill the need people have to fuck around with some bricks instead of working. That doesn't count. I'm working. The second obvious option is to build a condo on it. That has been the prevailing option for pretty much every other factory around the area, to a point where the malting is literally the last one standing. 30% of housing in Saint-Henri and up to 35% for the Turcot area, where the malting is, are condos, compared to 18.5% for the rest of Montreal. It's alone, and it's not getting younger. The option is appealing. The housing market makes a lot of money right now, as the property value of Saint-Henri increased 267.4% from 1996 to 2016, and the population of Saint-Henri needs a larger market for houses, given that they make 88% the income of the rest of Montreal on average. 1 in 3 living on what's classified as poor income, and 42% of families spending a third or more of their income on rent, while there's very few plots on which to actually develop. If we had control over what kind of condo we build, we might even be able to keep the building mostly as is, preserving what in French is called patrimoine, and in English is most commonly translated as heritage. For reasons that will later become apparent, I will opt for the French version, and translate it as patrimony or patrimoine. But then, we're forgetting something, aren't we? The patrimoine is not only the building, but also the living and social memory we make of it that tells of the story and place. What story is there to a condo? What does that say of the choices we make when valuing the lives and community of the people there? Actually, let's get even more precise. If we strip away the economic theory, what does that leave the people living there? Like, for real. Some of you will already know what I'm talking about. It's gentrification time, baby! What's gentrification? Gentrification is a social process that changes the economic character of the neighborhood through the influx of richer residents and businesses. In other words, gentrification causes a significant increase of property values and cost of living because of a change in economic conditions. Note that the residents do not need to get richer as a whole, but rather as an average. It's not caused by the benevolent hand of the market raising people's quality of life, but by outside influence making things worse for people already there, and giving them nothing in return but the assurance that new residents will have it better by virtue of their already existing wealth. Enter the first character of our, frankly, overwhelmingly large story, Renwick Development Inc. What they want is, in their own terms, to demonstrate how private development can assume the responsibilities for providing for social needs without the requirements of any government subsidies or financial assistance. And they want to do this by developing housing for people who have specific lifestyle needs and whose needs cannot be addressed by the numerous speculation developments aimed at foreign market interests. With microcondos dominating our landscape,
Holy shit, shots fired!
Between 2008 and 2015, the city placed a moratorium on the sale of the malting in apprehension of a potentially publicly funded project. Having not found either a suitable group to take care of it or funding to develop it, the moratorium was dropped in 2016. That's when an OCPM recommendation gets released, saying the malting should be saved with private funds exclusively. The city takes on the recommendation, and Renwick gets their proposal heard. The plan was to take on construction in 2017, but obviously that didn't happen. The world would be a lot less pink for it. In 2019, however, they supposedly entered into talks with the Southwest District, and as of now, the 25th of October 2023, their website reads, 2023, the rebirth of the Canada Malting begins. Breaking news! I just checked back in the 26th of February 2024, and the website is straight up gone. I hope that doesn't completely invalidate the whole point of this video. Just going off the bullet points, they want to build artist studios, a park, a public road to connect the canal, all roads are public, you're just too much of a pussy to use them, an integration center for autistic adults, a commercial zone, offices, and 160 family homes. In addition to those, you have a minimum of 60 public housing units mandated by Saint-Henri at 15% of housing for building projects of the nebulous a certain size. They have committed to 28% affordable housing. On top of that, Frappru mandated the construction of 4,500 new social housing units in the Southwest District, with a minimum of 500 in Saint-Henri. The 60 of the malting wouldn't solve that problem, but it would help a lot. So, what's the alternative?
We're at war!
Alright, listen up, men. With only one faction is just a piece of land. So God, in his immense judgment, sent us here to do his work, and his work is bloody. That's right. You, son, have been conscripted. There's a war on the malting. If Renwick represents the private industry's attempt to produce economic growth in a post-industrial world, Anula Malting is the true blue people's take on raising each other up with collective ownership of the material of their social system. I'm talking making the malting into a community-controlled space for care and cohabitation. The entire project would require the group, composed of citizens of Saint-Henri, to gain the rights to purchase the malting, something they say would take a 2-year moratorium in order to amass the funds of $45 million necessary for its reconstruction. The plan gets trickier, given that the city has said no government money could be used in the process. The money would instead come from various community organizations like Solidarité Saint-Henri, Papier Comité Logement, and Centraide, which is a shame considering the $15 million of government allocated money specifically for this purpose. What that would give us on the 12,500 square meter footprint of the building, which they can demolish and reuse parts of to varying degrees while leaving the silos and house intact, is a library, small showroom, bike group, hair shop, pharmacy, and co-op cafe. They want to put funds on the roof using aquaponics in order to generate their own food and sell back some at a profit to the food distribution center. And they want to put data centers in the silo, rentable office space, park, post office, and kindergarten. Finally, there will be a museum dedicated to the industrial history of Saint-Henri and, of course, at least 200 public housing units. Apart from the funding, several other problems come in the way of the project. Prior to getting elected as mayor, the Plante de Riz administration pledged to do what they could to get it off the ground, which was surprising considering Benoit de Riz himself was the only elected official not to support halting private development on the site in 2013, only to get elected in 2017, having changed his mind, and then performing full 360 and not do anything in favor of the malting. The fight for a moratorium has been, and continues to be, the primary objective of A&M before they can think of engaging in meaningful work for the eventual construction or managing the malting they want to see. To this end, they were asked to publish a business proposal in February 2020, which they eventually did in March. Seeing as various sources from the time claim that they failed to produce this business proposal, I've gathered that they missed the deadline, which is something they seem to do quite a lot if you listen to politicians involved. It's an unfortunate reality in revolutionary politicking. There's a lot of paperwork involved.
What if they're lying to you?
Oh, for fuck's sake. These guys are asking for what? $45 million to purchase the malting, and we're just giving it to them? Anula Malting. The malting will be ours, and Solidarité Saint-Henri. That is their name. If I was a private development, I would probably also call myself that to get the people to fund my project, and then just build a more expensive condo. And what do they even want to do differently? These two proposals seem pretty similar. We call it astroturfing or some shit. Fuck it. Put on the tinfoil hat.
I have some dots to connect. Yeah. Alright, I'll be honest. Most of the effort done researching this part was spent on trying to find if there might be a way we're getting swindled. I called it astroturfing, which is the practice of funding a fake homegrown movement to make it look like there's citizen involvement, until you can get that involvement from people at your benefit. And I'll be even more honest here. I'm kind of disappointed it wasn't the case. Think of the headlines. Trans girl fucks big boss man cooking the proletariat. I was never good at journalism, so I dropped out. I think that's the unfortunate reality of expose journalism. Most of the time, you'll find that reality conforms easily to what it appears on the surface. At least, if this is the kind of stuff you're looking for. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. It's not every day you'll find cases like Theranos, Watergate, and Epstein. Given this apparent unchanging reality of the system, a lot of people will opt instead to make reality conform the way they think it should be, and create a network of secret realities that underline the surface. Believe me, I was disappointed when I found out the reason my side is losing isn't because we're sabotaged from the interior, but because it's just really hard to win when you're advocating for change instead of continuation. But you'll only get anywhere in activism by acknowledging the real struggles and how to do activism. So, picking back up where I left off, I'll go over what's actually going on under A&M, but I'm warning you, it's not much more than what you see on the outside. Again, at least if you look at it from the lens of conspiracy. A&M was started in 2013 when a private condo project on the Malting united a group of citizens into forming a group to fight against this. The condo project was likely Renwick's, the same ones that are today getting closer to achieving that project. After the backlash succeeded, the idea stayed dormant until 2017, when they formed the A&M proper, now with the name, funding, and under the supervision of Solidarité Saint-Henri. Saint-Henri lacks basic services, including a post office, with the last one seemingly closing a few years ago. The postage is now handled by independent contractors. Residents are reporting it harder to get decent food. These are the effects of gentrification, and also part of the reason I was worried about A&M. Since Saint-Henri is one of the poorer areas of Montreal, people are finding it harder and harder to get by. A&M says they want to use the malting to solve this. The proposal is, like Renwick's, very much in the spirit of trying to out-offer superfluous services. For reference, A&M offers 13 facilities on top of the housing they're expected to build, compared to Renwick's 6. It smells like a fix-all, and I don't think any of their marketing necessarily encourages thinking otherwise. This is where I diverge from the conspiracy narrative. I said they worked under the supervision of Solidarité Saint-Henri, so let's look at what these people have accomplished prior to the malting. In 2021, as part of their larger program to combat food insecurity in Saint-Henri, SSH completed their Epicentre project. In the basement of the Saint-Zotique Church, you'll find a community-owned food bank kept up by a team of volunteers people rely on to get decent food in the neighborhood. From 2008, they've held meetings with the community to advocate for construction plans by the city, and have by and large succeeded in getting the community voice heard. They and other organizations have set up a helpline people can call concerning problems of social services and rights. A&M is also supported by PAPIR Comité Logement, an organization fighting for broader issues since 1969 and housing rights exclusively since 1989. Furthermore, A&M's and SSH's organizational structure, which I will summarize, is dependent on the action of the same people it tries to help. They will make an announcement that a work group has begun, and residents of the neighborhood will be able to come and discuss with experts about what should be done on questions of food security, elderly care, housing needs, or any other social need that requires attention for the community. For A&M, these are specifically in relation to how these needs can be addressed with the malting, and how its development should progress. Typically, these work groups will convene a couple of times over a period of weeks or sometimes months until consensus. I want to add that this model is not unique, it is also the one that the city has started using for its development plans. Once an accurate reading is made, it will be transferred to a decision process by members of the collectives and acted on by the mobilization community in charge of publicity and organization. Sometimes a pain, sometimes a boon. Give it up for democracy. We'll keep finding this throughout, but this is not a move fast break things industry. This is proposal after proposal after studies and surveys and redesigns and community roundtables. There is something to be said about the way the malting tries to lump in every social problem into one fix, and I will get to saying it later on, but this proposal is not Renwick's. I would put Renwick with a trend of benevolent capitalism that tries to reconcile community needs with capitalist principles, whereas A&M wants direct action on behalf and by the community. It's under that lens I'll compare the two proposals to understand which is more beneficial. Now, the second problem we run into is a very pragmatic one. Is it possible? I'm not a business major. What I have is a lot of documents from A&M detailing cost estimates, revenue sources, space allocations, and various other factors necessary for the management of malting. Let's quickly run through it. Cost breakdown, pause to read. Total of, according to my calculations, not including construction or data centers, $4,114,800 per year revenue and $3,635,700 per year in costs, leaving $479,100 to expand the project and whatnot per year. The massive cost of $45 million will come from community organizations, private donations, and government programs. From what I see, this is legit, but I don't have much experience knowing what these numbers mean. Instead, I think it would be more insightful to look at a similar project by a similar group. The Batzimal 7, an abandoned terrain owned by Canadian National Rail, has been at the center of a fight similar to that of the malting, down to the naming scheme. In 2009, Pointe Saint-Charles organization C'est à nous formed to get the building in the hands of the industrial community that surrounds it. Its main plan was simple: construct affordable housing for the working class and ensure that they would be collectively owned. Through decades of fighting, the push is older than the collective movement. They succeeded in adapting abandoned facilities into a thriving community hub that they are still adding more apartments in, along with rainwater treatment, a bike repair shop, microbrewery, farms, a grocery store, and more, in the process saving the building from private real estate agency. The people of Pointe Saint-Charles cite contentment and pride in the movement as it continues to do its job. Once again, we see a tendency to treat the building like the everything solution, and that seems to strengthen the community bonds, as everyone can find themselves using assistance from everyone else, especially when food is provided at a lower rate than privately owned grocery stores. This was a very short mini-malting rundown from the perspective of a project that could get its feet off the ground. Today, the malting is still facing much the same situation as the 7, being an abandoned industrial building in a gentrifying working-class neighborhood with unmet needs that the owner is looking to sell accompanied with a broadly popular movement to reclaim. They generally relied on community org donations and succeeded without betraying said community. So, what are we waiting for? Let's take back the malting! And I still care about the little houses on top. I think they're neat. There's gotta be more to it than that.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm sorry, I haven't been perfectly candid with you. Don't get me wrong, most of what I said was true, but it's also like not... It's like if I showed you an image of Donkey from Shrek and said, this is a donkey. I mean, I'm not wrong, but I'm sort of missing a lot, aren't I? Let's look at the part of the video where I fuck the dragon. Originally, this is about where it would have ended, more or less. I obviously had to consolidate some things and expand on some points for a script that is 1. Coherent without giving it all away, 2. A decent base for the rest of the video, and 3. Actually good. But then, after reviewing it, I realized I sort of wasn't sure what I was saying was even true. It was, in retrospect, but I couldn't make sure of it, and that bothered me. So I took that core and expanded it, treating it as the perfect encapsulation of the average expression on social issues, and by extension, also the average reporting. Again, don't get me wrong, I believe what I have achieved is better than the average reporting, of which I have read quite a few now. The real exercise was a balancing act, getting close to making a real point, or saying something in an interesting way. You have the requisite knowledge, now you only have to dig a bit deeper to uncover some truth, some reality people might experience that's tied into all this, and then shying away at the last moment. Yeehaw! From the first rewrite, the video was supposed to be about the failures of mass media to properly address important sociological issues. What usually ends up happening is they find a world of facts and numbers and tie them together with some kind of call to action.
In this case, it's to support the efforts of A&M. What gets left out, the more complex reality of every way someone could hold an object in their mind, is like facing a hydra. But all his teeth are heads, and all his horns are heads, and all his heads are also heads, but there's more of them. And to confront him means analyzing things not as they are, but as they are to someone. Ultimately, it means saying something as opposed to stating nothing. I think that's what it means to mean, saying something that can't be factually agreed on. Narratives aren't a collection of facts. They're the stories we weave through the facts, how the circumstances shape us, and how we define ourselves. There isn't an investigation without a narrative to be told. So I did that. The video I ended up making is, by its nature, sometimes irreparably separated by its parts, each one being one point of view, as a snow globe is a point of view into a winter scene, yet a winter scene slightly different from every other snow globe. I tried to mend these themes, and I hope that gives the result an anthology feel, though one that's greater for the sum of its parts. I think it's also better on 2 viewings. Now, I didn't kill that Hydra. God knows I couldn't. Heck, nowhere in this do I mention my 2 favorite books I read while making this. Humanly Possible, 700 Years of Humanist Freethinking, Inquiry, and Hope, and The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity. Books that could very well be relevant to multiple sections of this video, and that I will no doubt reference endlessly in the future. I could mention other media that affected me, like Everywhere at the End of Time, Disco Elysium, or Metal Gear Solid. For lack of less poetic words, my soul is practically screaming to talk about how I see the world through everything that touches me. I just can't keep adding to the fractal that is every single subject humans can investigate. What I can do is keep making and never stop making until my bones are ashes and God is sure I won't come back again. And what I can't do is face against the pile of endless pieces I need to express that grows every time I can strike something off it. Ha! I did it! I did express my version of the experience of Everywhere at the End of Time. Suck my immaculate girl dick universe! I put the whole scripts, the notes, and the sources in the description. Something I do because I like for people to have an open view into everything they see around them. If you were clever enough, you could probably figure out exactly how I wrote this video, how I researched it, what thoughts passed through my heads plural, and how I viewed things until I was forced to write about them. But you don't need to do that, because I'll tell you exactly how I wrote it. And in every spot I could fit, I can tell you through the medium exactly how this affects me. This is a view into the parts of me that are a part of this. And it's a journey I want to take you on, like a confidant or a diary. You can now experience the joy of being one of my friends and constantly receiving updates on how fucked I am currently with the documentary. It'll be a joy to do it, but now I think I've talked enough, so I'll leave that for intermission too. For now... It was 30 days till Easter when the elm tree at the church. Thank God it fell on Friday, 'cause at least no one was hurt. There's fear might delay the second coming of the Lord, 'cause stained glass crucifixion wasn't stains upon the floor. We spent the day of cleaning and the day to bore the hole. The stained glass ones that cast a godly light upon the fold. But come Sunday service, all the faces now are gray. Commands to take donations as the felt full knelt to pray. But on Monday they discovered that the man who built the glass was the only one in town who could, and sadly it passed. His father, who was 90, said the tools were in the shed, and he kindly tried and resurrect the window from the dead. The congregation argued, but the wise ones all rejoiced. 'Cause on the one hand was solution, and the other was no choice. So they gave the man their blessing, and they gave his hand a shake, and then gave him all the coins they had collected on their plates. It was 7 days till Easter, they'd seen neither hide nor hair.
So they came and knocked at supper times in hopes a man was there. But banging from the basement was about all they could hear, and curses that might make the devil blush and wash his ear. Come first thing Easter morning, and to everyone's good grace, the man was up on ladders with the window nailed in place. He was covered in black velvet like a hood or like a veil. He pulled the sheet and there it hung, apocryphal and frail. The seams of melted jack, they were crooked like a spine. The glass was rough like hands of man against the hands of time. There were bloodstains in the red and there were teardrops in the blue. He said it may not be the best, but it's the best that I can do. The chapel felt the silence, it was more than just surprise. This monstrosity of color slid its tongue across their eyes. They shivered from exposures like babies born again. 'Cause in every pane of glass was all the joy and pain of man. There was every fearful smile, there was every joyful tear. There was each and every choice that leaves from every there to hear. There's every cozy stranger, there's every awkward friend. There's every perfect night that's left initials in the sand. There's every day that's filled so full the weeks could float away. There's all those days spent wondering what to do with all those days. There's every lie that's ever saved the truth from being shamed, and every secret you could ever trust a friend to hide away. There was the fortune of discovering a new face you might adore, and the thrill of coming home to find her clothes upon the floor, and the prideful immortality of children in the home. That the storm can't grind the mountain down, it can only shift the stones. There's everything your mouth says that your lips don't understand, and every shape inside your head that you can't carve with your hands. And every slice of life reveals another slice of life, emblazoned imperfections in a perfect stream of light. It all flooded through the windows like rapids made of fire, and then God broke through on sunshine and sat down, 'cause he was tired. He was tired. As the thunder in the hardwood settled back into its place, God removed his veil to show the scars across his face. And some folks prayed in reverence, and some folks prayed in fear, as all the shades and chaos in glass became a mirror.
I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lips and sneer of cold command tell that its sculpture well those passions read, which yet survived, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sand stretch far away." To start this new segment off, I'd like for us to journey slightly north of the malting into the Village des Tanneries. It's a historic site. It's not Göbekli Tepe, but it is pretty major for Quebec. As the name would suggest, in 1685 or 86, someone set up a tannery in Upper Lachine Road. Then a couple more followed, and by 1825, when the Lachine Canal opened,
what was now called the Village de Tannerie des Rolands, had 466 inhabitants, 63% of which worked in the tanning industry. It had to be located a bit outside of town because, and this is based on numerous sources, tanning smells like shit. A parish you might recognize was founded on the site in 1867 by the name of Saint-Henri de Tannerie. By then, it had been growing along with the canal out of artisanal production and into industrial labor. Saint-Henri is the story of the industrial town. It was founded as an industrial center and grew with industry. It smelled like shit, and in 1905, just around when the malting was built, the population of around 21,000 was poor enough to be absorbed within the city of Montreal. But such is the way of the industrial town. We broaden our scope entering the 20th century. In 1967, Montreal hosts the World Fair, and we have massive construction works. We build a metro and dump all the land in the river, creating new artificial islands, which you can see using these two maps. And just like every city in America, we get obsessed with building more highways. They were not harmless. 20 buildings and 100 housing units had to be destroyed. But such is the way of the industrial town, and its devil here was the Échangeur Turcot, passing not through, but around Saint-Henri. As it turns out, highways need to be maintained, and this is where we enter my lifetime. I remember how fucking ugly it was, and I remember trying a bunch of ways to actually cross it on my bike. It was dangerous, and frankly, should never have been built there, or perhaps at all. Then I remember one day construction starting and changing how it looked, and even adding a segregated bike path for about 20 meters on the vast gulf that is still definitely there. I mean, for fuck's sake, look at it. This is still not bikeable. But I digress. This is the story of what went on to make that change happen. In 2007, people realized the Échangeur Turcot was breaking down, and they started looking into how to use the opportunity of the reconstruction to change the Southwest Arrondissement. Several roundtables and committees were put in place to investigate the locals' opinions on various proposals. They were called Table de Quartier. Solidarité Saint-Henri is one of them. You'll never guess what they have to say on the Table de Quartier. Quote, "The Table de Quartier are the most important actors in sub-municipal democracy." End quote. The OCPM is who they submitted the proposals and studies to. In my story, they're like Anubis judging people's hearts before they enter the afterlife. Either way, several good things came out of it. Saint-Henri got a bit greener and a bit more bike and bus friendly. But let's not forget, this is a project to repair and expand a highway, and this highway would need one lowly water drain that had to be built on the vestiges of the old village. It's the village that was built outside of town because it stank, that was an industrial center to the developing Montreal, that grew with the industrialization of the canal, whose industry got prosperous and citizens poor enough to be absorbed within Montreal once adult, who continued being the poor yet necessary part of it, and whose industry left a permanent scar on the land, only to rip a larger one through by demolishing it all. And now, continuing the theme, that original old village had to be demolished too, once Montreal wanted to modernize and rid itself of that period of industrialization. But such is the way of the industrial town. People protested, vigils were held, historical societies protested the injustice, archaeologists rushed to find 150 boxes of artifacts and building remains before construction could start, a huge amount that was slightly pressed by the impending threat of losing it all. That was the first half of September 2015. On the 19th of September 2015, it was a nice day outside. People were presumably gearing up for more resistance to the construction project, and archaeologists were packing up what they had found in only the first sector, the younger part of the Village de Tannerie. On the 19th of September 2015, construction began. No one was told it would start. Why the 19th? They said it was a nice day out. So on the 19th, a nice day out, the plans for the rest of the constructions were put in motion. Sector by sector, archaeologists finish up digs, and as they pack the boxes, construction move in. So I welcome you to the entrance of Saint-Henri, passing under the interchange. It's painted green, it's set on concrete. This is the story of the industrial town.
This world is not my home. I'm just passing through. My treasures are laid out somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. They're all expecting me, and that's one thing I know. My Savior pardoned me, and now I onward go. I know He'll take me through, though I'm weak and poor, and I can feel at home in this world anymore. I have a loving mother up in glory land. I don't expect to start until I shake her hand. She's waiting there for me in heaven's open door, and I can feel at home in this world anymore. Just up in glory land, we'll live tenderly. The saints on every hand are shouting victory. Their song of sweetest praise drift back from heaven's shore, and I can feel at home in this world anymore. The song of sweetest praise drift back from heaven's shore, and I can feel at home in this world anymore.
Renwick development, I think it's fair to say, is pretty idiosyncratic, or at least the outcome of unique modern social and economic pressures. I think we now have enough of a base established to start building up what syncrasies we're IDing. Or, I suppose if you're following building analysis analogies, we've seen the exterior and now we can figure out what's at the core of it. What are the walls made of? What material, what building techniques did they use to arrive at this? Let's recap. They're a private development firm, and they intend to make money with further development on the Canada Multi.
They want to build in an area filled with condos, where modern capitalism eclipses history, and yet they plan on adding community housing to their project, at least in part. And they blame the devastation of the communities around on foreign-owned condos catering to a specific lifestyle that involves being a lot richer than the current or past housing market of Saint-Henri should allow for. And yet, they oppose the community project they compete against on grounds of unprovability and lack of financial backing. I hope you don't mind. Let's do this one like literary analysis. Just this once. Let's get away from sources and academic papers and into what I'm good at. Here's the setup. Renwick is your Blorbo from your favorite TV show, and the outcome of the malting, the odds of this arc. Is A&M the antagonist? Is Renwick a new kind of capitalism? Are those even good questions? Let's find out. Capitalism effectively began in the 90s when Ronald Reagan kicked Roosevelt's ass in season 1 and proclaimed, "I will make it so that anyone who works hard enough will be rewarded, and those rewards will benefit the rest of society." That has been the founding promise we have seen be experimented with throughout the rest of the show. The desire itself is explained in World Economics Prelude, 0, when the evil King Louis XIV's order was flipped, making a change that echoes in Ronald's words many years later. The king had set up his empire on the right to rule of dynasties and on the continuing power of singular, self-perpetuating institutions. When the American rebels, led by George Washington, overthrew him, they envisioned a way to step out of that power centralization and oppression and into a world of freedom, where no man is accountable but to himself and where all power can be challenged in order to form a free and happy society. Note that the theme of freedom is not an inherently self-verifying aspect of World Economics DX, it was forged in contrast to that specific version of oppression. This is not an aspect of the show that is lost in later seasons, as people keep forming ideologies and gaining power in contrast to their current reality. If the climax for Season 1 was the triumph of Ronald Reagan with his stand free market over Franklin D. Roosevelt and his stand big government, symbolizing the triumph of the belief of a smaller government and more individualism, in a time of greater globalization and international dealings, the climate of this season looks like a confrontation of those same international world powers using the same economic battleground as Ronald's descendants. In more local terms, Renwick has developed the stand of free market to win over the malting, except that, having won in Season 1, Ronald effectively spread his influence over the previous season's enemies. Essentially, Renwick and others like him now have to fight with people they otherwise wouldn't in field and techniques they wouldn't. His enemies also have access to free market. We can see here again how the themes of economic freedom have been reformulated in contrast to the outcomes in Season 1, just as Season 1 of DX's themes only exist in contrast to Prelude 0. So, while in Season 1, Renwick would have had to compete against only A&M and call upon the stand free market and the belief that an economic approach to Reconstruction would be better than a non-economic and therefore non-societally developing one, it turns out that actually their greatest enemy for this arc is the same stand users created by free market under the power of the hero and ancestor of Renwick. Dun dun dun! See, this is why I keep up with WetX. You only get writing like that here or in Metal Gear. Therefore, Renwick have to train and develop their ideology in a way that allows for the protection of local interests, reframe the capitalist class as a small guy, and drive away from globalization using the powers of the same big government defeated in Season 1, all in one swoop and without cognitive dissonance. Thus, you see them complaining about the rich elite owning condos in the gentrified neighborhoods and owned by foreign owners. The battle is not one of class as the A&M versus Renwick superficial fight might lead you to believe, but the internal battle to reformulate economic ideology around capital versus capital and nation versus nation. Okay, I hope you're following because this is where it gets wild. The show writers have basically stated that they intend to keep it going forever, or until everyone making it dies. World Economic DX is descendant from the older 80s show International Trade Robots, Absolution, which descends from dynastic connections of the Order of the Lifeblood of Mars, and all of that is based on a book that no one read and everyone pretends doesn't have anything interesting in. Grumble, grumble. If you were to describe the biggest, most prominent theme across human history canon, something that has been pointed out directly by characters in nearly every arc, it is the impermanence of it all. This season already seems to approach a narrative climax, but if not now, another would still have to replace it eventually. The themes, framings, and conflicts won't last forever. So here's where I might spoil where it goes next.
The ideological and narrative antagonists of Renwick has moved away from A&M, letting them define their ideology outside of that very current conflict. Instead, their ideology must come, as we've learned, in contrast to something else entirely. What could this be? Well, it's not like they've been silent either. A&M wants a project that is community-led and community-run, with profits redistributed for the benefit of the community. To those accustomed to Ronald, it can seem like its true purpose is capitalism, under a new code in the same way that Renwick did, thus setting them up as direct competition. If they present themselves as being in any way different, it is only to hide their true capitalism and win the fight underhandedly, but still on the same battlefield of capitalism. After all, the way of capitalism is to fold all criticism into itself. However, we've learned Renwick doesn't view A&M as their competition. Instead, let's look at their position in the most interesting angle. What if A&M has a point? While World Economics DX really wants to make it seem as though the class that overthrew the old empire was a group of lowly rebels establishing their freedom through a new economic order, supplemental media has already complicated the issue in Power and Rebellions, The Mask of the Empire. While peasants certainly were present at the downfall of the emperor, they were, after all, being oppressed. The political switch was actually from wealthy elites within the previous regimes. Ones not necessarily from royal bloodlines, but still aristocrats and members of the upper classes that would have something to benefit from the downfall of the force that kept them from ruling more. And the ones who developed the stance using the new economic order were largely people trying to preserve the same methods of power, hereditary and exclusive, and framed their arguments within that narrative. You see, just as now the fight is not between Renwick and A&M as it is between Renwick and other people like him, back then the fight was not between the Emperor and the people with their stand collective labor, but between the Emperor and other classes like lords and the wealth aristocracy. Thus, the fight has been transferred from a fight between classes and their power over the people to another fight in between those who still hold power over the people. This framing recategorizes the whole of World Economics DX, where the protagonists are dubious in their heroism, and the antagonists of certain arcs go from obstacle to inconsequence to the protagonists of future arcs, with the goal of subverting the whole power-fighting power theme we've had for a good couple of seasons now. Thus, the argument of A&M is not let us hold and generate wealth using the malting, but rather let us challenge what it means for power to exist and find the meaning of freedom that has been left out in previous changes in power. Now, I have no way of guaranteeing that's what the show is planning for the future, but that would be truly the most grandiose plot twist in the history of television. And that is why ships... And that is why I self-ship with A&M. Thank you for coming. None of this is historically accurate. If you take anything from this, it probably shouldn't be a history lesson. Maybe a lesson in how history is written. Challenge all power, not because nothing should get done, but because all power lies in assumptions that go unsaid and justify subjecthood. We're still talking about a building, right? Well, what about the people who have the power to control not it, but what it tells? Wait, but who does the malting belong to? Easy, it's Stephen Kwan. We covered this earlier. Wait, but who does the malting actually belong to? Right. So there's a few people claiming the building is theirs. Anula Malting, a group whose name counts as a dubious legal claim but a strong revolutionary cry. Stephen Kwan, the one who holds the papers, and finally the graffiti artists and amateur stuntmen that basically rule the building currently. The argument for Stephen is pretty straightforward. The state says he owns it, he probably did something to deserve it, and he can do what he wants with it. I don't have much of a problem with that, but I think it's interesting to at least see how any of these claims make sense together. Ownership. Oh my god. Politics. In my cutie video. Yes! Is the right to do what you want with a certain object, the prime example of which would be your own body. You own it, you can do what you want with it, and you're free to enjoy it until you inevitably pass, and then it's all mine, baby! But even that's muddy, let alone everything beyond it, like owning a house, or in our case, a factory. Laws exist that make it so you can't do all the cool stuff you want. Most of that time, that stuff would violate someone else's bodily autonomy.
say by stabbing them in the chest repeatedly. Interestingly, on the other side of the spectrum, you're still not completely free to do some stuff to your own body. You're not allowed to get tattoos in some places, you can't drink alcohol below a certain age, etc. So I think it would be fair to say ownership is on a spectrum of how much control you get over that thing. Whether you're a god that can reshape its molecules however you want, or you're just some guy that has a receipt saying you own an NFT. This video was written when that was still relevant. I said molecules, but ownership actually can extend past physical objects and into the realm of ideas. And that's a really important concept to understand to the modern world, so listen carefully. If we extend the concept of doing what you want with something a bit further than the ability to control its physical state, we can get trade through the exchange of ownership. We can get the ownership of a company and its actions, or even the ownership of a percentage of the company, but we can also get copyright. This is where we attribute identity beyond the physical representation of an idea, say a drawing of a character, and instead consider the idea itself, and therefore all subsequent representations of it, to be the object owned. This creates a lot of debate and confusion to what owning something implies, but it's important for later, so keep it in mind. So, what about the second half of the equation? What makes you deserving of ownership? Because there really is no natural law to determine it, it's all humans. This part is interesting because it's a huge difference in various economic models. In capitalism, it is said that the best way to develop is to grant ownership through exchange of capital that would originate from work of some nature. Someone bought something, they deserve to have it because they contribute an equal amount of society to get it in exchange, creating surplus value for both parties. It also necessitates ownership of the self in order to work out, otherwise you really have two systems in place, one for the upper class, aka the capitalist, and one for the lower class, aka the slave. Socialism gives ownership of the base necessities and therefore a larger ownership of the self in order to achieve higher desires beyond survival. Communism gives equal ownership of the resources of a system to all participants of the system, so the citizens of a state should own an equal part of its wealth and industry, and the workers of a factory should own the means of production. That's where that phrase comes from. Ideally, eliminating class in the process. Georgism gives ownership of land based on the functional societal cost of keeping that land from the rest of the people. Other systems, such as feudalism or fascism, grant ownership of various things based more on moral principles than the best way to organize a society. Oh, and of course, anarchy considers ownership to be a flawed concept to varying degrees depending on the flavor of anarchy. Yeah, that's just me glossing over huge details. Then, every framework does. The point is how useful the analysis you can do with it is. Now that we've completed the crash course into ownership and economic theories, I'm gonna ask the question, what does that mean for the malting? And I hope you'll see the different perspectives fall into place in the challenge with conversion. The malting has been around in the neighborhood for longer than anyone there has been alive. It's 120 years old. It's been featured in artwork of the neighborhood, it's been talked about well before this video by hundreds of people and publications. It's just generally been a permanent aspect of the culture and the region. I hope you can see through this video a bit of the meaning it's taken on for people there. As such, while the physical bricks and steel belong to Stephen Kwan, the idea of the malting has evolved to be owned in small parts by every citizen of Saint-Henri, because they have created, molded, and used it for themselves. It belongs to them in the same way that the Mona Lisa belongs to Florence or the Eiffel Tower to Paris, or everything in the British Museum to not Britain. That's what it means to own a piece of culture. If we accept that, not only is it sad to see the building itself go, but in the case where it's transformed into condos, it becomes a form of theft to all the people who grew up with it. As if seeing the Louvre burning to the ground as the director pisses on the ashes. Now, the graffiti artists and climbers have taken on a much more direct interpretation of ownership. If ownership is the ability to do something with an object and the owner chooses to do nothing, leaving it rotting on the ground, then they don't really own it, do they? It becomes the property of whoever thinks they can do the most with it, and the most usually manifests in the form of a drawing on the wall or a makeshift playground. While people may think graffiti looks ugly, I find it still adds value culturally. You know, it becomes a bit more personalized. The building becomes more than just a dead pile of bricks waiting to be swept away. It's valued by some people. It becomes a canvas, and if you really pay attention to it, you'll start recognizing names everywhere. There'll be a vast culture of tags everywhere in the city available to you. People, events, art.
What I'm trying to say is graffiti has a certain honor to it in its repossession of public property. What that means for condos is up for viewer interpretation. So what's the city doing about it? Good question. There's a balance in our world and individual actors choosing how to build societies informed by the will of capitalism and governments building societies from a collective understanding. I will mostly ignore that balance, having already covered the individual aspect, and instead will focus on the city's side. Though it's often spoken about as though cities inherit identities, Mediterranean cities are relaxed and easygoing from the good climate and people, the opposite is more often true. A city's identity comes from what it chooses to build and destroy, just like individuals, people, or government are faced with challenges and can choose their solutions, leading to very divergent experiences. Look at the problem of car sprawl and you'll see exactly what I mean. Very often, cities in America have chosen to subsidize cars over people. The problem isn't inherent to being in America. It comes from the choice of solution to problems that exist elsewhere. Policymakers build more, bigger roads, set automobiles as the main form of transport, subsidize suburbs, keep everything far apart, and set parking minimums. The same challenges have been met differently in different countries, leading to vastly different experiences and identities. But this isn't a video about cars, it's a video about the industrialization in Montreal. In this section specifically, I will look at how Montreal as a city has chosen to build its identity during the deindustrialization and modernization period we're currently in, how it has treated communities of people that showed to be diverse with varying interests and challenges, and how it treats the conservation of its own history. To that end, I will pull mostly from Montreal's own evaluation guide from culturally important buildings and monuments, as well as the works of Montreal historian and preservationist Daniel Gilbert, from whom many photos tangential to the malting originate. So how exactly does an evaluation for culturally important buildings and monuments get done in Montreal? You didn't ask? It's because you're in my world now, bitch! The first step is to assemble a cast of people and groups affected by any changes to the building or monument. There can be up to 10 representatives involved in discussion, including the city, the owner's consultants, and experts in architecture and preservation, and the like. The rest of the seats can be filled with groups like A&M, SSH, or other community organizations who represent the people most affected by the result of the evaluation. They will then have 3 months to discuss subjects including the possible societal value of the building, its history, current state, its place in iconography, and various other doodads people like me care about, that will fit into various values the building can hold, its construction method, materials, symbolic, historical, aesthetic, or scientific nature, etc. During the 3-month period, they will visit the site, reflect individually and in groups, and, as is the case with the malting, commission external help to evaluate the building. The goal of the process is to arrive at consensus, which the paper helpfully defines as the point where all parties can agree the paper actually describes the discussion around the building, and explicitly not as a unanimous agreement on all points, which I think is pretty smart. It's important to note here that the ones writing the evaluation are not the same as the ones participating in the discussion. They are the eponymous Division de l'expertise en patrimoine et de la toponymie. The other notable thing is the recommendation the evaluation guide makes to update the documentation every 10 years. I say it's notable because the original Renwick guide is now over 10 years old and, to the best of my knowledge, has not been updated yet. That's for the straightforward method, but the guide also outlines various values it holds that informed the choices for the people applied throughout building evaluation all over Montreal. The guide says, and I quote, "By taking part in the respectful management of its patrimony, the city recognizes their cultural character and integrates it fully to other dimensions, economic, social, ecological, of sustainable growth." This seems nice on the surface, but do note the guide was already in place by the time the Village des Tanneries was torn down. What I fear is that, even then, the guide and its intentions were respected. The village was excavated, albeit with heavy machinery on their ass, and the remains were put in a museum with compensatory funding. But still, the village isn't there anymore. You can't see it in its proper context, and the inhabitants who, in 2007, before the guide went into effect, still lost their house to a highway. The Canada Powerboat at 4000 Saint-Patrick was identified as an exceptional industrial site, then brought by the city and left to ruin. The Sonoco factory in Griffintown, subject to a movement by the population to protect it, was demolished. The Standard Chemical Factory, right next to the malting, also subject to the population and community orgs' protests against demolishing, was demolished after authorization from the local council. The trend I see and fear is one where cities replace caring for their patrimony and caring about it, where the second seems to replace the need for the first. The way the talks were done, the evaluation written and consensus reached, the building appropriately appraised, then no longer needed. This is generally not out of malice, unless there's some party out there who really hates old buried buildings I'm not aware of. But I'd also like to propose a more interesting reason for why cities and other governing bodies tend to do this than pure profit, so bear with me for a moment. Montreal is not a singular identity. Saint-Henri is very different from Griffintown, despite being physically very close. It's very different from Côte-des-Neiges, it's very different from Westmount, from Rosemont, from Notre-Dame-des-Grâces, and so on, and so on. And the patrimony reflects that. It reflects hundreds of years of class and language disputes in every facet of life. The guide, while of course leaving open that possibility in evaluation documents, does not mention this when speaking culture. It speaks as a Montreal guide of Montreal culture. When it says, the affirmation of a collective cultural identity, reflected by the equality of its locals and the architecture of its buildings, contributes not only to its self-awareness, but also to its international positioning. I suspect it tries to put every culture on one scale, different but measured against each other, with a line apart from values. The elements characterizing a site do not hold the same importance or contribution to patrimony. If some elements are positive to its value, some may be neutral or even detrimental. Yeah, that line, I feel like it supports that interpretation. In short, what cities like doing, much like every other system, is uniformization. With or without willing it, policies will tend to a state of fewest option and fewest variation. So the outcome of cultural evaluation is not, in many cases, to appreciate and highlight the infinite complexity of patrimony, but to singularize it and fit it within dominant culture. The workers of Saint-Henri have had their stories appraised, and the city has recognized and understood how to integrate it. Between 2005 and 2006, France has set up a commendable program of creating writing to give access to the arts and culture to poorer workers in Caen. Despite good intentions, presumably, the program had flaws. The study, Social Exclusion, Creative Writing, and Democracy, outlines the experiences of those same workers. This is what one of them had to say. I called Philippe, and I told him I'd quit, because what you want to write isn't our history. They take in our sights without knowing our history. They don't smell our sweat. They didn't taste our blood. They don't even know what it is. They sit there, they imagine, and they're not from our horizon, and they can't understand this attachment to a fucking alley, a fucking trash can. As good as the program seems to have been as a writing stress relief, it was seemingly set up to bring Caen's working class within the broader French ruling culture. The flaws of the program, as well as the flaws of many cities' approach to culture, is to come at it with the understanding and perspective of one prime culture, and moving on from there to the path of standardization. So what does a good approach to culture look like? How is history made to be remembered? Have I read yet another paper right before I thought I was finished with my research? All of these questions and more with Alois Riegel.
I'm going that way. I'm going that way. I'm going that way. And Jesus, the Savior I adore, is with me each day. I'm clinging to Him and never shall stray. For singing His praises all day long, I'm going that way. The glorious news I'll tell and sing, as onward I'll go. For those who are still astray in sin, my Savior may know. I want to sing sing his praise above some beautiful day. For glory to him who died for me, I'm going that way. I'm clinging to him and never shall stray. For singing his praises all day long, I'm going that way. The glorious news I'll tell and sing as onward I'll go. For those who are still astray in sin, my Savior shall know. I know I shall meet him at the gate when trials are past. I know I shall meet him face to face in glory at last. And I believe that when we meet, well then he will say, and I believe that when we meet, well done he shall say, for trusting his redeeming love, I'm going that way.
Here's one of the benefits of working on a video for so long. I was able to witness a once-in-a-lifetime eclipse in Montreal on the 8th of April, 2024. It was a lot more impressive than I imagined. In a cloudless sky, I could see the shine of the sun getting brighter and brighter, until at last I could see it with my bare eyes. A ring of white fire, encircling sheer blackness. I could not decide which devoured the other, whether the white fire was emptied out from the inside, or whether it was attacking the obsidian monument at its edges. I was swallowed by the eclipse. Alois Riegel is a man who died long before the previous total solar eclipse in Montreal, and as such, I have never met him. But he did write about monuments, be they celestial or otherwise, and that work was cited in the Evaluation Guide, so I had to read it. But here's the thing, that work was actually really good. It was refreshing and new, and ironically, a bit iconoclastic. Alois, as I call him, we're friends, says that my kunt is swollen. Sorry, I misread my notes. Alois talks about something he coined the Kunstwollen, a German portmanteau roughly translated as will to art. In it, I think, is a potent idea about the creation of art within a society. The Kunstwollen encompasses the idea of a society and how to shape and imagine the reality around itself. Alois compares it to visual art, in the way art is the desire of people to see reality in a certain way. The Kunstwollen is the desire to interact, to touch and walk through reality in a certain way. I think. See, Alois, or friends, isn't exactly known for being clear. As we move further, you'll have to accept that as fresh as his ideas can be, you and I are gonna have to do the heavy lifting in applying and defining them. Helped by the excellent summary of his work by Will and Michael, we are also friends of Era Architecture. But that's okay. I know you're smart and able to handle a bit of extrapolation. I know it, you fuck. You stuck around here, you're going nowhere. So we'll make it unscathed. Let's say an architect designs a building. The Kunstwollen informs the choices of the purpose of the building. The manner in which guests walk around the house, what they see, how that journey constructs the meaning of the house. Imagine this. You are invited to supper by a hobbit. Your first stop is at the front gate, where the view of the garden will invite long strolls and outside labor, and a desire to see and be seen by the community. As your hobbit friend opens the gate, the winding path to the door tells you of the leisurely pace of life, and how the low-lying round windows will be one of the only indications the hill you're entering is anything different from the surrounding landscape. On the inside, of course, adapted to the size of a hobbit, you will see most of the rooms at once surrounding you. The house is not compartmentalized as much as an extension of the garden surrounding it. Very prominently, you will see the kitchen, where a meal is served and another already cooking. It is the main portion of the house, where inhabitants will gather and mother will invite guests. You finish up eating after a nice evening, and say goodbye to the hobbits, and then you wake up. What you saw was a brief showcase of Kunstvollen. The hobbits' choices about their living environment and how they want to shape it inform the structure they've built. Factories, of course, also incorporate a Kunstvollen. They have a certain rigid practicality, a need for workers to be overseen at all times, a strict compartmentalization, and so on and so forth. Monument theory applies this Kunstvollen to history. What a culture leaves behind to be remembered by tells us of what the Kunstvollen of their societal organization was. When rings of stone or burial grounds are found, those act as a clue to archaeologists to measure what those people must have wanted to build for the society. This Alois calls unintentional or historical monuments. Intentional monuments are the ones built with purpose, to preserve a certain moment in memory. When a king defeats an army and places an obelisk, when a statue of a great person is sculpted, when a country gains independence and constructs a palace. Whenever the intention is for people to look at the monument and remember a specific event like a symbol, it's an intentional monument. So, which of these is the Canada malting? Intentional? Unintentional? Or perhaps even a secret third thing? The malting was built at the height of the Industrial Revolution in Montreal, yet its legacy now is mostly from its latter years. As history started to wane along the canal, the malting is about the transition of the industrialized world of Saint-Henri, and a monument showing the evolution and change of a society is an age value monument. If we place it on the scale, it goes event, moment in a culture's time, life cycle of a culture. The evaluation guide, citing Alois Riegel, pulls mostly from his ideas about monument values, which are like discrete measurements of a monument's qualities. They are not objective. They are a tool to better understand monuments in their separate aspects. At the very start of the video, we were talking about the housing need the malting could fulfill, its use as a large playground or as a space for farms and grocery stores. This is the use value of monument, pushing the meaning of preservation towards keeping the monument open and usable to preserve its original Kunstvollen. This value often clashes with the art value of monument, which evaluates the monument as a singular, isolated piece of art, separate from real-world context. The preservation of a piece of art in perfect state would naturally require as few hands to handle it as possible. For an analysis of a monument within its context, you'd be looking for relative art value, which contrasts the values and expressions of a period or culture against the one that holds the monument against the tides of time. Those ideas can challenge or be used to reinforce whatever status quo the observing culture holds. The monument has ideas about work and economics and the dealings of everyday life that need to be properly held up against those of modern Saint-Henri. Alois also proposes how the art of preservation has shifted over the century, from an emphasis on the perfect conservation of historical value to a shift toward the celebration of decay and rubble of age value. These all, of course, presume an agreement on the ownership of the monument, even if it belongs to a society at large. But what if no one wants it? What if the monument falls into obsolescence? In 2005, Stephen Kwan expressed surprise at finding out the malting was not classed as a historically important monument, in much the same way the number 5 silos are. Though the building had an owner, no one wanted it enough to put it on a list. No one claimed it. It was obsolete. Obsolescence is also the name of the 2005 expansion to the Canada malting. You cannot see it today, of course, but not because it was torn down. The piece of art, described as a poem to the malting for its 100 years, was made entirely of lights. Artist Axel Morgenthau tried to use his expertise in lighting engineer to... Do you see it? The maltings come back to life.
You can see the intense jittery white light of welding torches and the slow red and blue blinking of navigation lights. For only a couple of nights, the malting was brought back from the dead to show us the beautiful colors it sported when it was still alive. It's the best love letter he could have possibly made, and yet it's entirely temporary. It throws a wrench in the whole theory of conservation by creating what I call temporary art. Though the light is, thankfully, still found on YouTube, the real deal requires lights and operator power and, most importantly, meaningful change to the malting as a monument. Temporary art cannot be preserved as is, it can only be remembered. This would be a mildly interesting thought were it not for the fact that the vast majority of art is temporary. Temporary art includes all theater performances, all jokes, all light shows, all live music. The act of being present cannot be recorded on the vinyl, and crucially for our discussion, all graffiti. Graffiti holds perhaps a strange distinction of being the only type of temporary art that is only temporary because many people try to erase it. Yet if from one day to the next all graffiti were preserved in a museum, they would immediately stop being of any value. Graffiti as an art form is a rebellion against the inability of people to truly shape their environment. It is also created knowingly as a short burst of message that will fade or get destroyed or painted over. It is not temporary art because it can't be maintained, it is temporary art because of the recognition that temporary things can last a long time. That an expression of the present is not inferior to an everlasting exterior, that to own and shape the environment means different shapes and different owners as time passes, and that's fine. I cannot preserve graffiti any more than I can bottle a river, and maybe that's entirely fine, because the river still marks its own path in the land. The Great Pyramid of Giza, rather than a river, is a mountain. Very hard to ignore, destroy, or move. It was built in the first of three sequential kingdoms, Old, Middle, and New, with intermediate periods of a lower concentration of power as breaks in between. It had a huge impact on culture, something that is very intuitive by its enormous size and presence. Conversely, gardens are temporary. Flowers wilts and die, and if they don't, then gardeners do. British gardening doer Gertrude Jekyll and William Robinson are part of that distinction of gardeners who have died a long time ago. Yet when Penelope Lively wrote her book, A House Unlocked, she thought it fit to detail the garden of her grandmother's house, with the explicit mention of their names. This is incredible. These people are dead and their plants are no more, yet today they still continue to have an impact on the way people choose to arrange gardens. Gardening is undoubtedly a temporary art, so how can it be retained into the future, even 100 years later? Simple. Culture itself can hold monuments for posterity, not by building them from stone quarries, but by information transfer. The influence of those gardens were adopted by subsequent gardeners, who then passed it on, and on, and on to today. People have discussed the merits of their gardens, until people unaware of Jekyll and Robinson could still trace their gardening roots to them. Cultural monuments, just like physical ones, just like the malting, require constant upkeep, in an act of perpetual love, to stay relevant and conscious in our minds, so to fully destroy them would be to destroy the culture they accompany. What we are left with is the realization that the vast majority of our culture is temporary, that it comes from temporary art and artists, and that the parts that are preserved are not the whole, but a selected sample of forms and expressions that are considered worth preserving. Yet those art forms are derived from the temporary art that was not. It is hard to tell whether temporary art is bubbling in monuments from the inside, or whether monuments are the protective shells of the temporary nature of society. Either way, we are swallowed by the eclipse. Society's monuments extend past physical constructions, of course, and the unintentional monument can reveal things before its culture expires. Capitalism, gender, sexuality, all hold monuments erected over time, dedicated to the worst practices of society. Not like the whole concept, but big enough and it's in there. The article, Deindustrialization, Gender and Working Class Militancy in Saint-Henri, Montreal, is a reminder that all monuments can be torn down. And I cannot stress this enough, it is worth a read.
If for some reason housing disputes, the history of communism in Quebec, the fights for reproductive rights, the actions of the capitalist class, or a sweeping decades-long retelling of the struggles that made today what it is are interesting to you, go read it. If instead you want to hear a facet of it mixed in with personal stories from a tranny who doesn't even work a factory job, then stay here while I'll tell you what it means to be a person in a society built for others. Two factors largely contributed to the construction of the canal from the 1820s to 40s. British capital and Irish blood. The blood was the result of a large influx of immigrant labor ready to work worse jobs at lower wages. It came at a higher price, however, when the blood had infiltrated the land and forever bound it more and more to capital and the working struggles. In the 40s and 50s, large strikes took place among industrial populations. Rather than bargain with the workers, companies preferred to move out to places with lower working conditions, kickstarting the chain reaction of deindustrialization. In 1970, after the closure of the canal, companies left altogether. Workers had to follow or face an uncertain future, the result of decades of over-reliance on certain corporations for the local economy. As the article "The Wounds of a Class" tell it, the Canadian left drew from a well of nationalism against American imperialism until it turned out that America was being hit just as, if not harder than Canada. Capital had no allegiance to any country, which was fucking terrifying. And yet, time after time, the curse of the canal comes true, shaping the history of the place around the conflict between capital and the people. Even today, the curse still lingers despite the malting rotting, all other factories torn down, and the capital metaphorically dry as it was before they dug it up. People have proposed many plans for the malting. Many of those plans have been about housing. However, many plans have also been drafted about the people that live in Saint-Henri, mainly the workers. When you reconstruct a monument, you reconstruct the people around it. As it exists right now, Canadian society is constructed under the assumption of capitalist values. Industrialism, though still very much capitalist, has a slightly different version of capitalism. As society has evolved, monuments like the malting have been clinging on to the past, and the industrial community around with it. The industrial working class had its own customs, its own way of deciphering the world that permeated within each of the people inside it, like a big superorganism that feels for and because of the individual. Just like every society has its own way of staying connected and sharing pieces of life, despite any connection or lack thereof within its individuals. This, Raymond Williams calls structures of feelings, the same thing that separates a housing unit from a house. Plans for the malting have been operating as if it was a closet that the people inside are waiting to come out of. The plans of Cardinal-Hardy and Renwick and the Turcot renovations all to some degree plan for the bridge between the post-industrial workers and the modern value-sensitive worker. Montreal itself sets apart a special class of architecture to be valued in its Monument Evaluation Guide. The Échangeur Turcot made space in its plans to reconstruct the streets around the fact that more families would be living close by instead of worker housing, but also made plans to transform the neighborhood into a recruit-tourist neighborhood, attractive for outsiders but without consideration for the principal demand for social housing within. Cardinal-Hardy wanted to install shops on the first floor of the malting for the convenience of purchase for workers around the area, and work cubicles and offices on the inside. Certainly, the economic principles around these design decisions might be sound. Some of them even have a benevolent goal of granting equality between the workers and the richer folk that used to run the factories. It's a fresher start, but equality in the system of the bourgeoisie isn't meant to last. Capitalism has been tried, and without continuous fresh starts, its natural conclusion is domination. Now that we have the chance for it, how about we leave the system of the bourgeoisie and give a chance for the workers to assert their own system? Here's what the people from the 2005 to 2006 French Writing Project had to say about it. We've been rejected as unclean, put to the side. They don't remember us, so we don't exist. If we die of hunger or if we lose our house, it doesn't matter. We're experienced workers, but not professional, so they put us through training. They call it reinsertion, but it doesn't do anything. Michel Provost. Our life is our own. We free ourselves of servitude to those who would dominate us with their supposed superiority financially, intellectually, and socially. We advocate for our right to live free of dependence and domination. We ask for no pity, only the recognition of our full value as citizens. Catherine Hugues. Well, I'm a tranny, and I have something to say about systems we're forced to live in too. Queers have our own monuments in the same way capitalism is a monument. They're what make of me a woman, and they're what lets me move in social circles as freely as I can, constantly redefining myself. They are, no joke, one of my greatest source of hope for the ability of people to control their destiny.
I could live as an equal, if closeted, man in the hetero world, but I would rather live as myself in a gay world. I would rather live in all our worlds. When I hit 17, I began looking for a job with the singular intent of moving out. This was an excruciating process that filled the already stressful year of still living with my parents and going to school with an extra burden. It ironically required a lot of unpaid labor to find a job. Turns out, I missed my deadline for moving out, 18, but I did eventually find a sustainable job, which led to step 2, finding housing. Apparently, being a recently employed teen out of school is not a great position to bargain for shelter. To spare you the details, I went by many apartments and people, many of whom lovely, the people, not the apartments, to arrive at the goal I set myself as a child. I'd like to focus on one connected theme in my years-long stressful descent into hell. I already said it, I am a very gay trans woman. It's a catalyst for my decision to depart, a hope for what I'll accomplish once I emerge, and a burden to have to bring into my housing hunt. When I find possible roommates, I could not move out without roommates, not in this economy, not with this mind of mine. I always announce in no unclear terms that I am trans. This is for 2 specific reasons, the first of which personal. If I am to live with people, I would like to live and express myself and get treated as freely as I can true to myself. Not that I would reduce myself to appeal to bigots, but living with them would absolutely hamper my freedom and self-expression. This is a problem, but it's also one that is contained to the dynamic between trans people and transphobes. If they don't like me, they can leave, and if I don't like them, I can also leave. The bigger reason I do this is that if I choose wrong and the people I live with are transphobic, they have infinitely more power over me. Before the advent of anti-discrimination laws, thank God for those, if a bigot decides to fire you or to kick you out, the system empowered not the victim, but the bigot. Homelessness is not a light threat. It is well enough to silence most people into complacency. We have anti-discrimination laws now, at least where I live, so firing someone for, quote, being gay is legally frowned upon, yet homelessness remains. That homelessness is not a fact of life. It is a fact of the current system in place. It is a product of a lack of housing, a lack of pay, a lack of mental care, and an overt hostility to the specific members of society, all of which are enforced and recommended by capitalism, and by whatever powers at play. And again, anti-discrimination laws and all, queer people are still overrepresented in homelessness. Prior to the pandemic, 27% of queer Canadians had experienced homelessness, compared to 30% non-queer. So while the system might not be personally bigoted, it enforces the mechanisms and people that hurt whatever group is chosen as the less deserving. It creates its own lower class while in effect looking impartial. It doesn't help that gay, trans, black, immigrant, etc. people are statistically less wealthy, so have less power to defend themselves. If I am kicked out, it is the state that does the punishing. I'm saying this because it's very hard to realize that if you're not on the receiving end. The system can absolutely seem fair if we assume homelessness is a logical result of some lives, and that nothing plays upon the balance to create it. Thus, we arrive at the ultimate distinction between bigotry that forces people into homelessness, that keeps them silent and unable to afford more for themselves, and the personal bigotry of one person saying mean things about my sexuality, the one that is taught in schools. I do not fear the second, I fear the first, and I am in a much better situation than a lot of people I personally know, some of whom have lost their job for it, some of whom have tried to kill themselves. It is also where capitalism shows us that it will mold itself over whatever society deems appropriate, to keep its own engines going. There is not supposed to be a link between sucking dick and living on the streets, but it was created to keep making money for the wealthy class.
Candy I come to pay my body and all that it requires in this world. Candy say I'd like to know completely what are the souls discreetly talk about. I'm gonna watch the bluebirds fly over my shoulder. I'm gonna watch them pass me by. Maybe when I'm older, could see. If I could walk away from candy sing, I hate the quiet places that cause the smallest taste of what will be. Candy say I hate the big decision that cause endless revision in my mind. I'm gonna watch the bluebirds fly over my shoulder. I'm gonna watch them pass me by. Maybe when I'm older, what do you think I'd see? If I could walk away from
Hey, do you want to know what true eldritch horror is? It's a song by the Lemon Twigs.
There's a leaf that returns in the fall that no one can recall when winter comes around.
I've omitted mentioning it till now, because I've learned it pretty late, and nearly no one else has actually said it, but the Canada Malting used to have a crane. It seems pretty obvious in hindsight. It's a factory that gets its materials from boats on a canal. Of course it has a crane to transport them inside. And yet it's not present on any of the art I've seen. A&M hasn't mentioned it either. The one mention of the crane, built in 1930, I've seen, is from a 2012 study by the Patrimoine et Toponymie Division, report of the Placement Cadence Inc. Holdings Company, done by the Atelier Contexture, headed by Eric Millet, as required by the city government. Page 59 has a sketch of it given to the permits office in 1930. And that same report agrees the loss of the crane, sometime before 1976, is probably the greatest loss the Malting endured. As it states, the crane symbolized a connection to the canal that was severed along with the decline of said canal. I want to talk about the Malting as a monument to memory. Try to imagine it, if you close your eyes. Its silos of brick and concrete, its windowless facade, the way it rises higher and higher on thinner I-beams jerry-rigged to support a weight too great for it to bear forever, try to imagine completing that image with a crane. As it breaks up the silhouette of the structure you're in, extending it far to the side, giving it limbs to move and grab around with. It connects you to the water, so much so that now you can hear it rushing past. You can smell the breeze, see the boats. Imagine yourself in a factory in movement, no longer stuck in time and place, as if ready to break out the earth and walk, pulling the boats along with it. Now it's personified. Now it's capable of will and temperament. Now it's the Canada Malting. All the people fighting to conserve the building don't even remember what they're fighting for. It's already been taken from them, and all they're left with is the feeling that they should protect something. Their history has been robbed from them, and they haven't realized it yet. The crane that stood there, that anyone today would call obviously striking, is gone, and we didn't know.
Its shape so clear in our mind, in an instant left behind, when snow touches the ground.
The canal informed the growth of both the Malting and Saint-Henri, and an industrial class, and of the rest of Montreal. The boats going by carrying merchandise are the largest recurrent theme in the history of this city. From the first traders up to the industrialization, the history of Montreal has reflected the history of sea trading, and the Canada Malting crane is the missing link that connects modern Saint-Henri to that history.
If it actually existed, that is. So far, I've only found that one document sent to the permits office, referenced in a historical analysis, as well as the common sense need for a boat discharging factory to have a sea crane, as proof of the fact it even existed. Old pictures of the Canada malting are quite hard to find, and despite my sifting through hundreds of pictures of Saint-Henri for the various periods of construction of the malting, I haven't been able to find one clear image that would prove or disprove the existence of the crane. No one else has mentioned it, not in the dozen or so historical analyses of the malting I've read. Fuck, the history's gone, and no one properly backed up all of the files. Sometimes, parts of history really do go missing when we don't care enough for them. The document even said where I could find the remains of the crane, either somewhere close to the edge of the water or on the canal-facing side of the building. And I couldn't find anything beyond this hanging house that I can't find any purpose for beyond being connected to it. So, I guess this was useless, and that was disappointing. I kind of wish someone had recorded it all before we're all pressed by time waiting for shovels to strike ground once again. So it goes with the history of the industrial town.
Where did it go? Well, someone must know, but no one makes a sound.
I've taken up the effort of recording my city's history in the past 19 years. Actually, probably 20 considering how long it takes for me to record and edit this thing. But that history is only backed up in my head. How it lives on in the future is limited to how much I'll say and write down. It's a very small slice of all the lives and experiences the city has to offer, but I've still taken up to recording it. My memory isn't infallible, so I've divided everything up in text files like this one, or in travel logs I keep when I bike around. So far, I've mapped out every notable thing in the middle of the island and directly outside of it. And I've divided it between the brains of the people I talk to when I tell them about changes they didn't get to see in person, or I show them hidden paths or cool spots. That info can exist beyond me, and it lives as long as it spreads. It exists even as a transient, far outside its own time. Every society records its own stories, but every society also does the work of curating which stories are worth telling. Our curation doesn't favor the everyday story of factory workers, and it doesn't favor the recounting of the story of one crane on one building that may or may not have existed. I love the work of Daniel Gilbert, Jay Clark, Fred Burrell, Elle Mackinnon, Stephen High, and Hubert Aquin, and every other historian whose work I've shamelessly retold for this documentary, because they allow for far more worlds than can exist within one person to inhabit the collective consciousness.
There's a voice that fights the flame, sends it back from where it came to the cradle of its birth. Grief has consumed our eyes and filled our bed with lies, like soil fills the earth. Abandoned the night like a dead man out of mind. No one trails the road. There's a voice that fights the flame, sends it back from where it came to the cradle of its birth. There's a sea so deep and wide, it speaks from every side, so that all the sailors hear. It's time to return to the shore. I can't hold you anymore, but they come back every year. Swallowed alive by the rising tide, as if it was still clear. There's a leaf that returns in the fall.
Something beautiful is going to happen. When I started this project, I knew next to nothing about the Canada malting. At that point in time, the fights regarding it were still to be concluded. Of course, the passage of time does to factories as it does to factories, and the longer I spent, the more real-world changes rolled in. In October 2015, Quanta Holdings and Renwick signed a purchase agreement for the Canada malting for $5.5 million. The agreement includes a 90-day inspection period, which could and has been renewed an extra 3 years. Within that period of time, Renwick published the 2017 Renwick Evaluation, a document heavily used as a source for this video. It is now January 31st, 2019. The official closing date for the purchase is now 60 days away, in April. This date is significant as it takes us out of the realm of history and into the present, where actions matter and consequences are yet to be determined. If Renwick purchases the malting, they will start development. Just as the Sea Crane was lost to history, so might more of its historical elements disappear. At least, that's what Renwick recently stated in an interview. So I want us to take a moment to appreciate the malting in the context it currently, liminally, resides. In 2019, both Quanta and Renwick, now acting as La Malterie, just pretend nothing happened, were involved in legal drama regarding the purchasing agreement of the malting. Issues arose that needed to be fixed in the document, and the purchase closure date came and went without deeds exchanging hands. Even in its grave, the Canada malting continues to be a complicated anomaly of a building, surrounded by strange characters. They fight through June, where disagreements will compound into a legal battle finally ruled in December 2022. The court rules in favor of La Malterie on all counts, giving them back priority of the purchase of the building. The whole situation returns to what it was a full 4 years prior. In March 2023, La Malterie finally buys the malting, hoping to put an end to the legal nightmare. However, the $1 million out of the $5.5 million required to complete the transaction, coming from a mortgage loan from Quanta Holdings, posed an issue when Quanta claimed La Malterie failed to pay the first 2 months of the loan. La Malterie denied it, and in we are for more legal troubles. This whole situation is equal parts hilarious, as Quanta has been the source of many problems through non-disclosure of vital information, double booking of the purchase of the malting, and contrarianism of La Malterie, as it is terrifying to see the future of an industrial cathedral from the Renwick Evaluation and cultural center point to be hung above an uncertain fate by a holdings and development company through endless legal skirmishes. A&M, founded in 2013, is hard at work still, despite a recent dip in the presence of media. I suppose hope is not something that is lacking in the neighborhood of the Village d'Henri. They have recently started work on a second proposal, still intent on asking for a moratorium on the building to collect more funds. Towards that end, they have started a petition aimed at the Direction de l'arrondissement urbain et des services aux entreprises. So far, they have 594 online signatures, with more physical ones on the way in local information pop-up booths. They have received a $12,000 donation from the Makeway Foundation used for communications projects. While their impact in local media has diminished since the boom caused by the Pink House, they keep going with info booths, reaching out to other organizations, posters, and an online presence. I feel it is important to note now that while A&M keeps going with volunteer help, many people who work there do it for a job, as they do in the broader Solidarité Saint-Henri. Most of their members are not from Saint-Henri either, even if their decisions are done from the table ronde in the neighborhood. A&M has also tried incorporating, so far unsuccessfully, to help in receiving financial backing. The proposal was rejected on the basis of too anglicized name and bureaucracy. Other efforts of theirs are directed at ensuring Renwick/La Malterie holds public consultation for their project on the malting, and, critically, they stick with the plan to include public housing. As A&M has told me, despite the requirement for social housing's minimum, many developers choose instead to pay a fine, lesser in comparison to the gained revenue from more expensive housing. While volunteering there for a day, I got to chatting about the documentary and showed them the model of the malting you're seeing in front of you now, the one I made. The talk got to the Bâtiment 7, also known as the B7. They explained to me that, despite the obvious similarities, the fight for the malting is quite different from the B7, since
Pointe Saint-Charles had an owner willing to give the terrain over to the community organization. The B7 wants to build housing within its walls, and still has not accomplished that goal, which makes it a foreboding challenge for A&M. Amidst recent fears about Renwick/La Malterie purchasing the lot, members of A&M, Papier Comité Logement, and SSH, and other tables de quartier, have raised various disagreements on how to proceed. A&M and Papier are firm on maintaining a 100% communal project stance until the very last. A&M's founding member, Shannon Franson, arguing that the situation has not changed much, given that the moratorium is still the primary fight, giving A&M a big lever to negotiate with. The other tables de quartier are more opposed to changing strategies or directly planning with Renwick/La Malterie. They will hold an assembly on December 4th, 2024 to decide how to proceed. It is now November 19th, 2024. Finally, I asked them how best any person could help. Staying informed and asking for the media to talk about the issues that concern you. Mobilize, sign their petition, stay watchful to hold developers accountable to housing regulations by being there at hearings and petitioning and contacting the city to ask them to enforce stricter rules. And of course, this one only really applies if you are in charge of Renwick. Please give us your land. That'd be great. Things don't seem to change much when you leave them be. Quanta Holdings Limited has threatened to pull out of the agreement by the end of August if La Malterie does not pay the full amount of the loan by then. At the time I am writing this, it is nearly the end of August. This means we are faced with the future. If it goes to court, La Malterie will likely win, and if it doesn't, the purchase will likely still go through, only with more favorable conditions for Quanta. I would like to say the future is full of uncertainty, but I'll be honest, I'm pretty confident about this now that I've read the court case dated 2022 and the overall process of both companies. So instead, let's talk about what happens next. Let's talk about revolution. Something beautiful is going to happen. You look around to find you are not standing in the same place you were moments ago. It is all warped under the constant pressure and reassurance of being alive. Self-examination. As if beholding it in your heart, holding it in your hand, will leave you carrying something unrecognizable from what cradled you as you grew up. It will not care about you in the way that you care about it. You want to wake up, breaking the shell of the egg holding you, yet you also feel you are the aged hand, patiently holding it. And that is something to hope for. This is Disco Elysium. By that point in the game, you, as Harry Dubois, have had the opportunity to change. You have been Krasmazov, Tequila Sunset, Raphael Ambrosius Costo. You were forced to get your shit together to continue your place in the society in a way your alcoholism and discoing sheltered you from, for the first time in a long time. By that point in the game, you are forced to realize you will never hold the world in place just for you, and you have a choice. Harry Dubois, saddest couple. You choose to affirm that what will come next, though it is not for you, will be of you, and will be beautiful. Revolutions, contrary to the things you find in history books, can only happen in the present. They can only happen with the weight of uncertainty pressing down on all the actors. It is the culmination of challenges down to one point in time, ready to tip the balance in one direction or another. It doesn't have to be violent, it just has to be a change. The Canada malting, as I'm now forced to realize, is not the same one that cradled me as a child. The one that is static, the kind of static seen on a badly tuned TV that has died before I could catch a signal, the image now embedded on the screen, slowly fading. Like a person holding their breath moments before passing out. It is its own revolution. And what will happen I do not know, but I know it will be beautiful. And I know you will be there in the midst of it, as beautiful as any part of the world. And I know you will be there in the midst of it, as beautiful as any part of the world. After all, you are a communist, and we should read about the revolution.
Last night,
The true nature of Ozymandian nightmare is not in the height of its minds, their darkness, nor even their ability to project them through time.
It is rooted in the ability of those monuments, of the people who order them, to monopolize history, to drive the lives and experiences of a multitude into a singularity. The trunkless legs of stone and a stern face are the only thing that remain of Ozymandias, King of Kings. Nothing remains of his kingdom. Nothing of the people who labored the fields, who built the monuments. Nothing of the interactions that by their nature are fleeting. There is not recorded the tears and laughs of their people, nor their toys, nor their struggles. The power of Ozymandias is one that surpasses that of any other tyrant. His power destroys all else, now and forever. As the dawn of everything is pointed out, it is a myth that the intermediate periods of ancient Egypt contain nothing of worth. Though the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms certainly leave us great wonders, history is not measured in wonders. Power is. During the hundreds of collective years of dark ages, people have toiled just as they had at any other point in time, and certainly not for that entire period had they lost all civilization. Perhaps their greatest achievement was in pushing back Ozymandias. The Canada Malting is a monument to people who get left out of stories. It is not Ozymandian. It does not centralize history. It broadens it, individualizes, and humanizes it. If it was not obvious, I do not like this Ozymandias, and I do not want him to complete his project. Perhaps the best we could do right now is to humanize everyone, and tell stories about them and remember them when no one else finds profit in it. Maybe it is time to put Ozymandias to sleep. I like gardening. It's a way to take care of things directly around you. The more you pan out, and the more you reveal the intensity of all that can be felt, in the rubber that erodes on the roads into the distance further than you can see, in the game that's played when the windows of buildings light up, then turn off in a concrete hourglass, to the infinite tide of the sea pushed up and down by the strength of invisible hands. Then you forget about the trees, about the flowers and the domesticated feels we're collecting all over our lawns and by our windows, about the fact each one of us has responsibilities and possibilities in how we decide to shape the smallest spaces we inhabit. And then you wake up, and you remember to water your plants. You remember to check for them. You realize the warmth of the sun, the presence of everything around you. Your vision can't go that far anymore, but you've traded it for another sense. Touch. So here I am, sitting on a chair that someone else left for me, admiring the gentle pace of the day surrounded by the tiny choices each of these people made for our gardens. The malting has a garden, though it's little more than a wildly grown forest. It will become proper and full when someone, anyone, cares for it, cuts the bad grass, plants new seeds, organizes the growth, and transforms the meaning of their environment. What's more anarchist than a well-lived garden? It's also a great way to literally stay in touch with the world and stay grounded. I mean, most of the research for this video was done on the internet, guilty as charged, but it's also left me a lot of time to think and calm down and notice the small joys in one abandoned building. So here, on the Internet Detox channel, I'm bringing you my own experience of tending to one garden for over a year, nearly 2 years. This video took a while. The reconstruction of the text, as I unearthed more and more info, nicely mirrored the efforts of reconstruction of the malting. As I find new things, I reorder parts, outline what's still relevant, what's indicative of how I went about making the text and how it reflects on how it turned out, and I removed the old sections that are now rotten. I've done it all, careful as I could, tedious and slow, despite knowing it probably wouldn't result in anything substantial. I've done it for myself, and I've done it for my friends, though I'd be overjoyed to hear someone might have enjoyed it. I could not have written text like the malting before writing the malting. This text is imperfect, but it could not be perfected without being written. I did not know how I would come to see all these issues, how connected they would feel. I did not know the malting until I wrote it. The section that follows is the final one, the final act. Following both the malting and gardening analogies, it's the section that shows the greenest, most alive future for the communities we've tended to. It's the denouement, and I don't think the text would make sense without it, no matter how complete its research and analysis. Ladies, gentlemen, botanists, I'll see you all at the end. The exits will be closed for the moment. Please do not start a fire in the theater.
I might have dug into Montreal a bit, and that's because they deserve it. But I think the PDUS for Saint-Henri was a great idea. People interviewed in the first drafts outlined they felt let down by previous attempts at livening up the neighborhood the city was responsible for. But from the multiple tries of getting it right from November 2015, 2 months after starting construction on the Échangeur-Turcot, to now, I estimate they've done a banging job at getting people involved and interested in the evolution of their neighborhood, then listening to the requests and finally delivering competently in infrastructure. In my opinion, the 3 pillars of public development projects. Anyways, in 2023, we hit a tremendous 1.8 degrees above average. It was the warmest year on record. The sea levels rose 21 to 24 centimeters since 1880, and half the planet is currently highly susceptible to the effects of climate change. It is, without question, the greatest current existential threat to humanity, and no one knows what, let alone if, our government is doing to stop it. So, what is our government doing to stop it? How has the PDUS planned for lower emissions in a neighborhood that is gaining population, and how can we afford to do anything else?
There's strange things down in the midnight sun by the men who mark the gold.
Keep in mind, we are talking about the plans that were formulated as a direct response to the Échangeur-Turcot construction in 2007, which itself has failed in appropriately fighting climate change, since it's a highway. Let's run through the list of positive changes. They promoted the construction of community gardens for people to get more of their food locally at lower emissions. They created a bunch of small and medium parks around the neighborhoods, which does a minimal amount when it comes to absorbing CO2, but does give more reason for people to take their trips locally and without cars, and helps the local ecosystem on top of reducing the heat island phenomenon within the city. They built bike paths, added bus stops, and rearranged streets to make them more pedestrian-friendly to support every kind of ecological transport they could. That one was probably the biggest visible change. Of course, there's also changes unrelated to climate change and pollution, but that still benefit the general population. Along with guidelines set during studies of the neighborhood, they built and are building affordable housing to meet the needs of its people. They went from 0 to 3 housing sanity inspectors. I'm not quite sure what they do, but it can't have been good not to have any. They secured $300,000 in funds for local organizations distributed to community grocery stores, elder care centers, and gyms, and a very particular emphasis on encouraging public art in Saint-Henri. You'll have noticed by now that what I'm saying is applicable equally to the PDUS as it is to A&M. This is not coincidence. They are both the result of the same community of people facing the same challenges. So before we progress, I think it's important we can all see that something is, in fact, being done about climate change and helping the population, even if it is not enough to beat all the problems faced by humanity. Third aside, before I get to my point, Mother Earth's Plantasia is a 1976 album that purports to be a good source of entertainment for plants. So far results are mixed on that, but for humans I think it's a pretty good impact. The album is of course aesthetically derived from pure and natural idea of earth and nature. It is simpler in a way other albums might be complicated or bogged down. In this way you could say the album is unpolluted. Naturally it's still music meant for human enjoyment and is only reminiscent of a simpler way of life because of cultural norms. We are in effect role-playing as plants when listening to the album. In the end, there is no contradiction between it feeling natural and it being natural, since it's only an album, and that distinction doesn't even make sense here. I've always loved Plantation in a special way, and I'll always feel like a lush, plant-covered room in New York for it. But sometimes the distinction between aesthetic and practical ecology does matter. It's a common ecologist's point that suburbs, despite feeling closer to nature because of all the trees, are actually quite a bit worse than cities per capita because they still employ a modern way of life that necessitates higher energy spending and longer trips. This is qualitatively different from the higher energy spending farms accrue in producing food. The larger terrains and much larger energy and water cost of farming, plus the often unnatural feeling process of getting it done, is outweighed by the fact that these are subsistence spending. They quite obviously produce the food necessary for society to be maintained, and expecting everyone to grow 100% of their own food at zero energy cost is not a reasonable demand. Conversely, the malting and Saint-Henri, located in a city, have their own energy spendings and their own burdens for fighting climate change. We know that they're both already engaged in solutions, so I want to find the contrast between aesthetic and practical in them. More specifically, I want to ask how, in this present climate, we can afford to do anything else but fight. When the plans for the Bâtiment 7 include artist studios, when the plans for the PDUS include funds for artists and public arts, when the plans for the malting rely on making the building not only practically functional but also aesthetically pleasant to the populace, it's easy to wonder where this specific drive for aesthetics come from. On the surface, it seems wasteful, especially when, like the suburbs, aesthetic taste or feeling closer to nature comes at the cost of helping nature. The argument would thus go that we should sacrifice beauty in favor of practicality and go full, and that's when it breaks down, because practicality has no aesthetic backing. It is a means to an end. Presumably, that end is minimal pollution, but like the ego without the superego, it is function without a form. Certainly, many people have theorized what such a thing would look like, ranging from brutalism to tree dwellings. Not only are both of these ideas culturally informed, the range between them is massive. The truth is, no such building, a purely functional one with no excessive doodads, can exist without being channeled through aesthetics, through deciding how, like Albus Regal, the floor plan is arranged to accommodate human movement and perception, what colors will be used for the facade, what view the window will have, what architectural style will be employed. The gulf between the practicality of a wood shack and the Rococo French palace is great, but it is nothing compared to the vast seas that separate the same wood shack from the pure, undistilled idea of habitation. The idea that the two contrasting concepts can even be mutually exclusive rendered null, we have to ask why there is such a push for art specifically. Not far from the malting, in the same neighborhood, is an anarchist commune. It is the kind of place the police do not go to, because those people deal with themselves. I don't want them bothered, so I will not share details, but what I have seen of their place has got me convinced that this is the greatest museum on this island, if not the entire country, and it is all self-produced. My point is that these are people that have to care for themselves. In a Hobbesian kill-or-be-kill scenario, these guys might find it slightly more productive to scrap all art production. In a world where every bit of food gathered and all heat matters, and there are the constant threats of nature and violence, it would be better in every respect to spend all their time fighting instead of doing art. And yet, they have created a jewel the likes of which I know of no other place that rivals, because such a world does not exist. There will always be the time and worth in creating art, because the scenario where all collective labor is dedicated to one task is not one based in reality. So the question of why we choose to do art instead of fighting climate change is not a valid one. We spend labor on climate change, and what labor we cannot spend on it, we will spend on making art. People erected Stonehenge when they should have been hunting because they had food already. They painted on caves when they should have been preparing tools because the others could also prepare. They told stories when they should have been sleeping because, well, what, you're not going to go to sleep now, are you? When I asked the tenants what they thought of their art, the response I got let me know that they couldn't think of any other way to do things. The place was theirs, and through the ability as humans to shape their surroundings, they wanted to make it clear that if they were here, it would leave endless traces of their person behind. They have made the choice to fight the good fight of life, and that to humans inherently means putting your soul into every object you're allowed to. The people will choose to make their surroundings nice, not out of ignorance of their doom, but to voice the emphasis on their choice to also combat it.
Avec le CPR qui gueule de son cafard en arrière du quartier, crachant de la fumée, on se croit en enfer et les classements de fer de l'époque moderne.
My favorite part of the song is that it doesn't depict Saint. Certainly, the images are poignant, but what they represent is romantic poverty. People huddling themselves around only the warmth that they each bring, oppressed and forgotten by God himself. That's never existed in Saint-Ry. The song was composed for a movie on the neighborhood released in 1962, an ethnography of the first day of school called Le 5 Septembre à Saint-Ry. That's what they expected to find here, and to be able to tell a nicely packaged working class story about laughing despite it all. What they found was a very normal neighborhood, a normal routine, normal children going to normal schools, normal worries about normal jobs and normal aspirations. In fact, I'm not sure such a place exists outside the minds of poets. These are worlds we make up, allegories to have people understand us, to make our feelings contagious. They're a small aspect of an already pretty small whole, one we can romanticize into belonging to, so as to make it fight the fights we want it to. I include myself in this, of course. My original intent was the same as those 1960s ethnographers, to talk about working class struggles in a place separated to me by only one highway. So what happens when the place over the highway gets treated like Albus Regal's age-value monuments? worshipped for the ruined. It's what I call the aestheticization of industrial ruin, and what Stephen High, in the article The Wounds of Class, a historiographical reflection of the study of the industrialization, 1973 to 2013, calls ruin porn. Stephen says the original purpose of the study of the industrialization in the 70s and 80s was specifically to understand it in a way to stop it. The struggle over deindustrialization was a cultural struggle through a class struggle, where a stable, high-paying industrial job is reimagined as an affront to the middle and upper classes, or partisan to the new division on labor. That fight having been lost, the working class and its structures of feelings become an impossibility in the modern view of capital, as distant to the modern middle class as the Mycenaean Greeks. The attempt of the modern middle class to then place that culture within its own comprehension gets expressed as ruin porn. In the same way, someone viewing actual porn is trying to place others' complex feelings and wants within the framework and grasp of their own mind and libidic needs. In essence, ruin porn is the singularization and folding of all narratives, viewed through the lens of distanced modern sensibilities, specifically one that leads to the conclusion that an industrial society so far outside our walls, it is still very recent, very close, that its wrecks, the monuments people still cling to, can only be the ruins of civilizations too lost and ideologically foreign to fully understand. Its effects are still felt by the population of the neighborhood. And that is more or less the mentality I came at this with. The story I came away with, one I am still writing, is much larger. It is, I hope, the story of 1,000 different things. Things that contradict each other, but 1,000 things is a lot. It might be enough for you to understand a place, its intricacies, its fights, the normality that unfolds there. The way things change, things don't change, and things need to change. I am recording this in the middle of a week-long bout of anxiety. Please be nice. We want to see change in the world that'll make the hurt people heal, and those that cause hurt come to terms with the ubiquitousness of the human soul. I'm talking about revolution. Socialists, communists, anarchists, stand on your soapbox, our time has come.
Oh, Danny boy.
Rather, it should have, but I'll let you in on a secret. We've been pretty slow lately. We get fucked by the climate, the police, the layoffs, all the while corporations make massive gains. The wave of authoritarianism from 2016 hasn't yet even stopped. So what do we have to do anymore but fantasize that someday, soon, a real revolution will take place that'll sweep America off its feet and fix everything? That fantasy morphs and adapts to the changing tide of desperate men. It becomes not a revolution but a rapture, the early Christian in his vision of brimstones, of a moral redemption and reckoning. I think we're rolled up in this, and it becomes easy to dismiss other people, to be okay with the bad if it ends up in the world we want to see. If it shows the world we live in right now isn't that complicated. I know it sounds a bit silly to be so into politics as the main aspect of life, or to be convinced by any rhetoric that promises people will hurt arbitrarily, but here's the thing. I don't think you ever have to be convinced in the first place. I don't have the answers, but it seems to me more something you realize you've adopted along the way. I don't think people are going to march down the streets demanding a radical break. I don't think there'll be a revolution in America soon. But it sure seems like it when all you can see is people struggling. If there's a socialist world, it's because I'll have fought for it and given the smallest respite to the people I can. I believe in that world, because what else do I have to believe in? But I don't think there'll be a revolution in America soon. I don't think there's a mastermind. Don't get me wrong, I believe in systemic change and real activism, even at the cost of power to the people who use it to harm others, but then I don't do it because I just hate some people. I want nothing more than to fight for those I love and let them live on terms they're happy with. I do it to reform the police system, to defund it, to give more caring and appropriate solutions to most of society's problems. Especially if that means helping out the cops that wanted to do good but aren't equipped to deal with what they have to do. But I don't think the world has to burn for it. That's so many words just to say the world is made in ways that create cruel behavior. We have tried so hard to change that, and we still hurt. Let's not let that stop us from trying for a better world again. It's three simple sentences, really, but it's hard to get them in the abstract. Or at least it's hard to stick to them. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I think we're a bit scared that the world really is just as unpredictable and complicated as it seems on the surface. That makes it easy to wish for something easier, to accept it. I don't think many of us has to truly be convinced of it before we go there. So is this counter-revolutionary? I ask you what revolution you see outside. Who is training militia, getting allies and seats of power, taking over factories? The answer is no one, so chill the fuck out, my communard friend. Militance is great, but if you want to change the society, you'll have to be in every aspect of that society. Someone has to be the angry guy holding the sign, but someone also has to be in whatever office tells others what to do. Someone has to get it done, someone has to tell others about it, etc. Society, no matter how idyllic or corrupt it is inevitably composed of a lot of people that have to coordinate to change most things. So I invite all of you to take up your part in that system, to build the institutions of the world you want to see. As Penelope Lively said in A House Unlocked, a garden is perilously unstable. A few decades of neglect and it melts into the landscape, its existence to be read only by the perspective. It becomes archaeology, with some tenacious growths hinting at what once was there. Gardeners know this. The fragility of the present is set against the robustness of digging and planting, the emphatic qualities of earth and roots and stems. The garden is to seize the day. God, how do I say this? Alright, so this was written about a year ago. It was recorded about a month before the presidential elections. Suffice it to say, my mind has been changed on a few things. Chief of which being the likelihood of armed violence in the United States of America in the near future. The only problem with that is that I believe it's much more likely to come from the right than any kind of workers' movement. I have somehow not written about it, and I have shielded myself from thinking about it too much because it is horrible news. But I am so sorry. I'm very queer. A lot of people I know, I dare say most of my friends, are also very queer. If anyone is interested by this documentary, I assume it is A, the people of Saint-Henri, B, a bunch of random socialist queers on the internet. And I am so deeply sorry and fearful for what might happen. Please, wherever you are, stick with those who love you. Stick to where you're safe. I work in the library. I know the people there will do everything in their power to try to preserve your rights to free speech, your rights to existence. But I don't know how much that's going to do in the face of government-supported citizen violence. So yeah, the elections have changed my mind somewhat in a direction unforeseen, yet terrible. Terrible in an eldritch way, revealing the horrors that I did not want to imagine could be stuck in the hearts of my fellow man.
If I had written this, I would have made it much shorter. We are on 3.5 minutes now, and I have nothing else to say than I'm sorry and good luck.
I don't know for sure what the painters of the house meant, so this is purely a guess, but it would make sense. Kind of. I think that's what a house means. I think it's a celebration of the community's ownership of its own history and culture. A declaration that, no matter what, the people capable of change and love are first and foremost the individuals capable of admiring the house and the malting it stands on. It's cheesy, but I've spent way too long writing this, and it's not like you're gonna leave now. To me, the malting means trespassing to exist in an area outside the common conventions of a city, focused on easily graphed things, as if a line on a chart could represent the people. To them, it's a giant canvas. To others, well, to others.
Anglais ou en français?
Ah, les deux.
Ok. Yeah, so...
Commencez en français.
D'accord. Fait que, qu'est-ce que vous pensez en général du building, la malting?
C'est gros, c'est gros. C'est un peu détruite. Il y a des arbres en haut qui sont partie de la structure maintenant, les racines.
Ouais.
Qu'est-ce que je pensais? C'est magnifique.
Avec les graffitis dessus, c'est magnifique.
C'est magnifique comme c'est peut-être mieux qu'un condo là.
Ah, définitivement.
Mais comme condo, ça va être parfait. Si on laisse le look à l'extérieur, ça va être parfait pour les pauvres.
Non, mais c'est ça. Faire du
les
social housing
chômeurs.
pour eux. Ouais, ce serait pratique. Vous pensez... Ben, vous avez déjà remarqué la maison en haut?
Ok. C'est bien évident.
Vas-y! Comment vous croyez qu'il avait mis ce qu'il a mis là?
Ça me donne peur.
Ah oui, non. Pensez à grimper ça. Comment vous pensez qu'ils sont allés?
Comment est-ce que ça passait?
Oui, quel chemin vous croyez que ça a pris?
Quelqu'un qui a fait les graffitis en haut, qui a peur de rien. Quelqu'un jeune, comme entre 20 ans et 30 ans. Non, plus âgé que vous deux. Mais...
J'espère. Ah, sinon ce serait ouf. Genre quelqu'un de 12 ans qui a monté ça m'impressionnerait.
Yeah. C'est attaché par une pièce de twist tie en haut, là, quelqu'un m'a dit.
Ça doit, ouais, non, de ce que j'ai entendu,
ça peut être dangereux.
C'est peut-être le monter.
Okay, je vais le monter.
Au revoir. Oh, commence à filmer, vas-y. Puis, fait que ouais, on a parlé tantôt, vous avez dit que vous croyez pas que ce serait possible de tout le rénover.
Bon. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? C'est ce qui s'est passé?
Je crois que ce serait limite possible.
Moi, je vais être premier sur la liste comme chômeur pour...
Je crois que moi aussi. je vais juste habiter proche du canal, je vais aller regarder, ce sera beau.
C'est étrange, hein? Ça doit être gardé. Mais vraiment, ça fait mieux si ça reste un parc ouvert au public.
Ouais. Fait que c'est comme ça que vous voyez, vous, c'est une affaire publique pour tout le monde, là.
Faire public et laisse ça ouverte aussi quand on peut regarder la montagne là.
Oui, non, absolument. Ça, la vue est vraiment belle sur la montagne.
Parce que sur le canal, au côté du canal, ça existe de moins en moins que quand on peut regarder la montagne. Tous les condos à ce côté du canal sont vraiment... le mot pour ugly, c'est... Laid. Laid ou laid? Lequel? Féminin, masculin? Laid. Merci.
De rien. Ouais, non, mais c'est vrai, maintenant, à Montréal, genre, tu sais, dans toutes les zones, tu regardes, puis c'est comme les mêmes buildings, puis c'est impossible de voir comme le Mont-Royal, puis c'est pas comme ça.
OK. L'autre côté, c'est dangereux, parce que le building, c'est...
Ouais, non, l'autre côté, il faudrait pas aller dedans.
C'est impossible de sauver ça.
Zach, tu as une question?
Non. Mais... Non. Je pense que c'est...
OK. Je veux garder le take.
OK, yeah.
Oh non, vous êtes parti. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de ce...
Moi,
Ouais, vas-y.
moi, je pense que c'est vraiment un beau building de base. Puis qu'on devrait vraiment faire quelque chose pour garder cet amphithéâtre qui est vraiment spécial et mythique aussi. Mais pour ça va prendre de l'argent. Puis, ouais.
Ok, je vais regarder le take. Je vais regarder le take maintenant.
I went on a house next to the canal before that. I saw a windsock, the fabric long torn off, leaving a still metal skeleton facing the setting sun. It was an industrial cemetery. Next to it, basking alone, amidst the rubble of its friends, a giant factory, serpentine and frighteningly upright, as if standing on stilts. It lay in a field of grass and half-buried metal equipment. They fell a long time ago, leaving now only silence. Many winters have come, not a sound, and yet the factory remains. Here, protected from the wind by its walls and next to a river that had frozen over, the only sound you could hear was the gentle creaking of metal, hung by the hangman of time, and left swinging as a threat to those that remain. So why are we talking about it still? Because history doesn't stop when we look away. Whether the past is worthy to be kept around just a bit longer, for those to reminisce of days when the sun was still high in the sky, or if we want to move on with what the future will call its own, that's for us to choose. Well, fuck me, sweet mother of Christ. After 1.5 years, I hadn't given up, but still, I kind of expected to end the whole documentary leaving the question of the crane hanging. But no, it's definitely real now. It was built with the silos and appears on photos all the way up to 1971, then disappears in 1973 or 74. Holy shit! I know they're not great photos, but they're clear enough to be sure. Here's a painting of the same type of crane elsewhere in Montreal to get a better idea. I guess I'll pad out the time of this part by telling you an anecdote of the malting. The street-facing sign of the malting is actually a facade. Well, obviously it's literally a facade, but it's also metaphorically a facade, in the sense that it's fake. It's used to hide something. You might assume that, like a lot of stuff in the building, those windows were boarded shut after being abandoned, but they were actually built that way. The lower floor was home to the supervisor's office, but the ones above contain ventilation, so they can't even be inhabited. The alley between Saint-Ambroise and Sainte-Marie Street is twice as big as usual, because that's where they operated the canalization of the Saint-Pierre River, which is a river that does not exist anymore. The movie Battlefield Earth, starring John Travolta, was filmed in the malting. That's a fact I included over like the half-dozen private development proposals that led nowhere. Yeah, I got nothing. I'll step outside now. Okay, yeah. I suppose I should end this with a call to action. If you live in Montreal, contact A&M, ask what you can do for help, sign their petition if they still have one going, contact the mayor about it, people in charge of your arrondissement, tell them you want to see the project happen and that they should put the site on hold. The tables d'arrondissement are the main sub-municipal form of democracy, so use them while they're there. If you live anywhere else, I'll just say that there's so many systems of oppression, you can always create your own systems of kindness. It's not going to change the world, but if you could make your own institutions, no matter how small, to say, give people a place to go for security, or to give them care, or food, or the very basics that a capitalist system deprives them of, that'd be great. If you would like to organize marches, protests, or strikes, and of course to unionize your workplace or to use the union to gain better workers' rights, that would be great. That's what I mean by systems of kindness. If you're gonna fuck the man, do it by providing as much leeway for others to exist outside the systems that hurt them. Now, if you'll excuse me.
Long journey home, boys.
Lost all my money but a $2 bill. $2 bill, boy, the $2 bill. Lost all my money but a $2 bill. I'm on my long journey home. Cloudy in the west and it looks like rain. Looks like rain, boy, it looks like rain. Cloudy in the west and it looks like rain. I'm on my long journey home. Black smoke rising and it surely is a train. Surely is a train, boy, surely is a train. Black smoke rising and it surely is a train. I'm on my long journey home. I hear the train coming and I'll soon be gone. Soon be gone, boy, soon be gone. I hear the train coming and I'll soon be gone. I'm on my long journey home. Homesick and lonesome and I'm feeling kinda blue. Sing out. Feeling kinda blue, boy, I'm feeling kinda blue. Homesick and lonesome and I'm feeling kinda blue. I'm on my long journey home. It's dark and raining and I've got to go home. Got to go home, boy, got to go home. Dark and raining and I've got to go home. I'm on my long journey home. It's dark and raining and I've got to go home. Got to go home, boy, got to go home. Dark and raining and I've got to go home. I'm on my long journey home.
Hey, if you've made it all the way through this part of the video, thank you. If you've just skipped ahead only to this part of the video, thank you still. If you've watched any part of the documentary I've made, thank you. This has been a huge undertaking, and I'm frankly grateful if anyone finds any interest in it. It would really make my day. I've worked on this for the past 2 years, and I still can't say it's over really, because I'm gonna have to translate this whole thing in French, and I have a couple more articles to publish about it, and obviously my political work with A&M isn't over, because I'm in too deep. Sometimes as a journalist, you're in too deep. God, a lot of things in these past 2 years have changed for me. I mean, like, I'm not the same fucking person I was. Fundamentally, I've changed in the past 2 years in a beautiful way, I suppose. Like, I've met so many people within the past 2 years. I actually found housing. That was the thing. At the start of this, I didn't know if I could be housed for much longer. And I wrote about it, and when I wrote about it, I still didn't know what the fucking future was. But now I found stable housing. Yay! And now look at me. I'm 20. And frankly, I'm gonna probably start having to plan how to live past 25, because it seems that it's gonna happen, actually. Yeah, these 2 years have been pretty cool. They've been nice. The project has
kept me busy in the dead of winter, and now I don't have to worry about it anymore. Now it's done. Except that it's not done. I'm getting sidetracked again. I want to thank all the people who didn't fucking send me their recordings, forcing me to use stupid fucking accents to record a bunch of lines all by myself. Fuck you. You all owe me now. I want to thank my friend Zach, who has been there at the start and helped me film some stuff, and was not afraid to look like a fucking fool on camera for the purposes of journalism. Thank you for that. And I want to thank A&M, I suppose, for the work that they've done. I want to thank all of those stores. I don't remember all their names. Fred Burrell, Stephen High, all the people that I've named during the video who actually did historian work. I thank you so much for what you do. This is amazing. And all the people behind the archives that I had to consult. Thank you. Thank you a lot for making this, you know, a fun 2 years. I'm gonna start HRT. I mean, soon, hopefully, but knowing the whole system, it's gonna be probably until August or September that I can start E. It's yeah, it's fucking bullshit. I know. Is that the last thing I say in this documentary? Have a good night. I love you.